Okay, welcome. It's Wednesday, 28 June, year of our Lord 2023. Got a lot to get to today. And I want to start with Brian Costello. Brian, you made the front page, or the Sequoia story made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. If Memphis can pull that up, I think we can show that. Brian, talk to us about this article. A lot's going on. My phone's been blown up in the last 2 days you've gone on. There it is right there, the Wall Street Journal, page one story. Already people, because McCarthy had a very bad day on Wall Street yesterday. CNN has said or MSNBC, he groveled to Trump after he said Trump wasn't the best candidate. Then he groveled to Trump and got a puff piece written with some quotes and exclusive over at Breitbart, but he groveled to Trump to apologize. And then his henchman, we talked about last hour, Paul Ryan, came out and said Trump was dangerous. Trump could win, and that was dangerous for the country. So this elite in the Republican Party is quickly closing ranks. Brian, give us an update on this story. It's starting to metastasize now. We know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. Talk to us about Sequoia Capital finally had their debut here in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, Steve, I don't know if House Speaker McCarthy's having a better day today because he's with Kevin Turner in Ohio. So
not Kevin. Hang on. It's Mike Turner. Mike Turner.
Mike Turner in Ohio today. I should know that name.
So what is he? That's a very important element of the story. What is he doing with Mike Turner out in Ohio today? Mike Turner is the Republican head of the Intelligence Committee that shut down the investigation into Sequoia. Walk us through why is it important.
They're at some Weintraub, who's on Representative Weintraub, who's on the Intelligence Committee, and one of the higher-ranking members is there too. They're at some ceremony, coincidentally, in Ohio today, as the Sequoia cover-up and the House intel with Turner breaks. As you know, McCarthy's getting rung through the mill because of a bunch of Turner's actions related to one of his top donors. It's just coincidental that they're there today. I don't know what ceremony they're actually at, Steve, but they're at some opening of something.
Talk to me about when you say he's being rung through the ringer. He's being put through the ringer because of activities related to his biggest donor, Sequoia Capital, and the cover-up. Walker, I want our audience to understand Sequoia Capital, McCarthy, what they did, and what's the cover-up. Let's lay out the building blocks and then connect them.
Yeah. So, like as you covered on your show, Steve, it was an open secret in Washington that America's preeminent venture firm, Sequoia Capital, the guy running their Chinese fund, but also one of the global stewards of the whole firm, was a guy named Neil Shen, who works for the Chinese government. So there was a lot of concern as the investments were going more and more directly towards weapons and things that impacted our national security. The risk of the flow of capital to investments was getting more and more questioned in terms of the profit everybody was making. So there were two investigations going on. Nunes opened after the Russia hoax investigation, put the whole team that was remaining there, Colonel Hurray, Colonel Pappas, other folks. It was the team that Cash was on the China investigation to look at how Wall Street was using, or how the CCP was using Wall Street and China. And it's actually interesting, Steve. You see in the news today, she's going directly to the business leaders now because he isn't getting what he necessarily wants from the U.S. government. I don't know if it isn't what he wants. He doesn't respect them enough to even deal with them. He knows who's running the country, and it's the folks stuff in the politicians' pockets. So he's going directly to the business community today. So Nunes and Harvey, ahead of the curve again, were investigating this. In parallel, the SEC should have been investigating Gary Gensler, who was Hillary Clinton's CFO of her campaign, signing the checks for the Russia hoax, is now the chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission. He should have been investigating Shen from Sequoia with two associates and a number of claims that I brought to the SEC. And then there should have been a third investigation, which is the FBI and the DOJ, which was ongoing. So there were three investigations kind of happening in parallel. So back to your question about Turner, when Nunes left, Turner shut down the investigation. He walked the team that did the Russia hoax investigation and uncovered the weaponization of the Department of Justice and Intelligence community out the door. He shut the China investigation down. Sequoia never responded to the questionnaire. And Doug Leone and his wife from Sequoia started becoming McCarthy's top donor. And I don't know, and I believe two of McCarthy's people were briefed on the Sequoia investigation. And I know I sent an email to one of them over a year ago, warning them that I was a source for a House Intel investigation. And this is one of McCarthy's direct reports that handles national security, and that they should be very careful with the money they were taking from Sequoia. I never received a response.
Stop. That's a hang on. That's a bombshell. Stop. You're saying that you went, and this is after. So people have to understand there are three lines of inquiry here. One, there's a House Intel, and this is the reason Nunes, and you go back in time, was starting to actually have some public hearings. The whole formation of Mike Gallagher's, the Select Committee on China, came out of public hearings that Devin Nunes was doing in regards to China. Internally, they said, we really got to ramp this investigation up from the House Intel side. And what he did is he deputized Pappas and Colonel Harvey, his top two guys, to really get serious about this. What they did is first, they looked around, they talked, and it's quite, because as Costello said, it's an open secret. What they did is they sent a letter of inquiry to go ahead. They sent a letter of inquiry to Sequoia. In addition, the SEC should have had something with all the securities violations, and the FBI DOJ was doing something. But the bombshell here is you said you went directly to the direct report for national security for McCarthy, and you told them that they about the House Intel investigation, they shouldn't shut it down, and about taking money from Sequoia.
Yeah, I was a source for the investigation. I was there. Anybody who needed it to provide them the information to help the country, and that I saw that Sequoia was now making donations to McCarthy, and that they should be very careful with that. There's claims sitting, and people need to know, Steve, the House Intel and the China Committee are select committees. So Speaker McCarthy appoints directly who's running those and who's on the committees. They don't go through the standard committee process. And here's another one for your show. And I actually think he's doing really good work. But after Colonel Harvey and I were on Fox in November, and some of the Sequoia news started to break, Maria asked Representative Gallagher, who's running the China Committee, about Sequoia. And we could probably get this clip at some point. But what he said was, we did some really good work in the House Intel Committee on that. Well, if the really good work is shutting down the investigation and letting Sequoia be the only firm that didn't respond, what's bad work?
Talk about their arrogance about not responding. I think Harvey sent them two letters of inquiry to turn over the following documents or to be subpoenaed. They don't even answer. Their answer is to pay Kevin McCarthy to send, and people understand, it's not McCarthy. Yeah. They've got a whole cash flow. They have a whole cash flow machine under Mike Moritz that goes right to Democrats. In fact, they give 10 times more to Democrats than they give to Republicans.
So now we do know the responder, right? He wrote checks to McCarthy, and Don Vieira from Sequoia, who used to be in the National Security Division under Monaco, and before that, he was actually one of the counsels for HIPSI. So he knows the process and the importance of that in terms of protecting the country really well. Don Vieira, Sequoia's, chief lieutenant in Washington, he changed his title, chief legal officer, public policy officer. He started meeting with the national security folks. So we had House Intel was going to do a criminal referral, was going to get subpoena power, and has subpoena power when McCarthy became Speaker and the House flipped in January. Sequoia doesn't respond. They start writing checks to McCarthy, one of the principals from Sequoia, and they start doing, there's all sorts of other stuff, Steve, in terms of Moritz does to the Democrats with his nonprofits, funding the demise of the China program at the DOJ and all these other things through the ACLU and through these vehicles they use. And that,
hold on, whoa. Let's unpack that right now. What do you mean what Moritz does? Because here's the thing. This is people, senior people in our government, this is the elites in our country that are in bed and business partners with the Chinese Communist Party. It has sold us out for money. Walk me through Moritz.
So Sequoia is basically, it has a partnership structure because it's a venture firm, but it's been run for years by two people, Michael Moritz, who's a big left-leaning Democrat, and Leone, who's supposed to be a Republican. So they spread their donations to both sides, right? So Moritz lives in San Francisco, a couple houses away from former Speaker Pelosi, runs in the same concentric circles as Pelosi and Feinstein in San Francisco with the big tech elite. He has a $4.2 billion nonprofit called Crankstart. So what he does is his China investments directly with his personal money into Sequoia's China's fund flow back into this nonprofit, and people can validate this. You can go on ProPublica and you can get Crankstart's 990, and you can see his Sequoia China investments and the return and how they flow back. So Moritz gets this money back tax-free, I might add. So Biden's out yelling about the rich paying taxes today when one of his top donors in the 2020 election has a slush fund for the Democratic Party with China blood money coming into a San Francisco nonprofit tax-free. He then writes checks. He's the largest donor to the ACLU from a private foundation. And then the ACLU starts lobbying the DOJ to end the China initiative. So the ACLU, I thought it stood for American. I think the C maybe should stand for China now instead of civil. The money coming from that, and Moritz put in 20 million that we know of into the ACLU as part of a $300 million campaign from his friends. So the ACLU then starts lobbying to end the DOJ China initiative. The DOJ China initiative, when Matt Olson, who works for Monaco and Garland and runs the National Security Division now, announces he's ending it, he references pressure from civil liberties unions, like he didn't mention specifically the ACLU, and pressure from universities to end the China initiative. So you literally have, Moritz from Sequoia funding Democratic woke programs in San Francisco. He's already funding Newsom, right? Doing this all tax-free out of his nonprofit foundation that's paid for with China money. There's a lot there, Steve. I don't know if you want me to. Usually have me slow down on something.
No. It's fantastic. The China initiative, when DOJ announced it, the ACLU complaint about the China initiative was a lot more talk than action. I mean, they're rolling up some professors, some guys that did GMOs. It's all performative, but at least it was something. What is their complaint against the China initiative?
I have the timing on this. So Ray did a speech on January 28th at the Reagan Institute, 2022, and he talked about how bad China was. And I believe at that point he knew the DOJ and the Biden administration were ending the China program, because the FBI really can't prosecute anything without the DOJ support. And I believe that was actually, I would have resigned over it if they were ending something I didn't think they should end like that, but he just decided to do a speech over it. He did a speech over it on the 28th. So when I walked in a couple days later into the FBI Washington field office revealing these claims, I thought I was going to, receive a round of applause and an exception, not a buried investigation from DOJ Main Justice, because Ray was out talking about how important this was. And what we had also showed with Shen is he runs the Yale Center Beijing. He's one of the top donors to Yale. His number two is very involved in, wait for it, UPenn at Sequoia. Some of his business associates have actually been documented donors to UPenn. And they're also at Stanford, the Center for Human and Artificial Intelligence is a friend of Shen's. It's a Sequoia endowed professorship from a Chinese national from Tsinghua University, Fei Li, who's was infamous for being on the board of directors and at Twitter and a bunch of things that she did when she was at Google in terms of writing a letter criticizing the Department of Defense. So she's actually the Sequoia endowed professor. So here you have Shen has used his tentacles investing in companies to penetrate into some of our top universities. And here's another one. In 2017, Steve, Jake Sullivan gave a speech at the Yale Center Beijing. And I believe he was probably paid for by Shen in that group at the Yale Center Beijing to give that speech. It was in December 2017 when he was sitting on the bench at Yale. But when those show up in the financial disclosures, they don't show up as Yale China payments, Yale Center Beijing, they show up as Yale payments. So they look innocuous. So you got people in the administration who are making money from this, who are now in the position to actually have to pursue crimes.
And your theory of the case is this is why there's been no pursuit of this. Do you believe in the response you've gotten in just this initial Wall Street Journal article? I already know, and I can tell you from the Republican side, there's a lot of heat being put on McCarthy, a lot of heat being put on Turner. What's your overall belief in this story?
I have three theories on why nothing's being done. I mean, I know why nothing's being done on the Republican side because the complexity of Sequoia being a McCarthy donor. Why the DOJ, the FBI, the SEC aren't doing their job. I believe a compromised president, they've been instructed to go soft on China to maintain the economic relations. I believe this involves their actual political donors, and I don't want to upset the donors. You know, some of the money they get from donors flows from their China returns. And the third thing I believe is that, we have this Chinese artificial intelligence platform in our country called TikTok that can deliver content based on learning about users. That becomes very important in an election to be able to, push out Trump indicted again, Trump bad, Trump bad. Oh, look at Biden's great policies. Look at Biden's great policies.
No. The reason, by the way, the reason they were as close as they were in 2022 is 100% TikTok. Matt Gaetz can walk you right through that. It doesn't need to be the future. In 22, the reason they closed some of these seats around, abortion, around the Dobbs decision, was because of TikTok. They've already used TikTok. TikTok was used to reach all these young women and to reach all these. That's why they had this big turnout in colleges. They've already weaponized TikTok. 100%.
Yeah, I mean the day they were talking, the day they were talking about banning it, and Warner introduced his bogus bill that he knew would never get through, just to look like he was tough on China and Senate Intel that he knew would never get through. Biden actually had TikTok influencers in the White House.
Not just TikTok influencers. That TikTok had transgender TikTok influencers. The ultimate demise of Bud Light was sitting there right in the Oval Office with him. So
yeah, there's a huge issue here too, Steve. And it's like, okay, these influencers, are they paying them, or are they providing free services to a campaign, which is an election violation?
Yeah, Brian, how do people get to you for your content? Because I can tell you the Wall Street Journal article is starting to metastasize. Also, there is a lot of heat coming on from McCarthy about what's going on here, and Mike Turner. This investigation of House Intel will be re-kicked off. They can't because this is now going to slide into criminal activity by them.
They have a China committee now, Steve. What's the China committee doing? What's Judiciary doing?
Yes. Not much. China committee is okay, but it's like geostrategic. We got to get down into the weeds on this. Brian, where do people get you?
On Twitter, VP Costello.
I hope, as I said, you have plenty of good security because you are really out there on a limb right now, sir. You've done a great service for your country.
Hey, not as much.
You've rattled the cages of very powerful.
Yeah, well, I know I've talked to some people in the military, and I think they have my back. So if I'm going to have someone defending me, I want it to be the American military. So the guys who talk to me, remember that.
Okay, well, we're going to hold them to that. Costello, great job.
Not
You're
the
a hero.
one, the real one. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, brother. We're going to stay on this story. It's unacceptable. Let me just reiterate. Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio, is taking his marching orders from McCarthy. They have waived all this because they took money from Sequoia. And that is just 1/10 of what the problem is. Mike Moritz and the Sequoia guys have been funneling money into the Democratic Party, including into the ACLU. That was one of the big instruments to get DOJ and FBI to stop the little bit of the China initiative. Remember, when Barr and Ray gave those speeches, I would put them up about how they're going to get aggressive on China and how China was the number one enemy of the United States, the Chinese Communist Party. That initiative, which didn't do great things, it rolled up some associate professors and rolled up some individuals, but at least it started putting a spotlight on this issue. No, they shut it down because of pressure, quote unquote, from civil rights groups, when this is not a civil rights issue. Remember, it's the Chinese people, it's Lao Beijing, that are enslaved by the CCP. And the people here that will tell you, like the New Federal State of China and others, are saying you have to take down the CCP because they're a dangerous criminal operation. And we see this from the Ministry of State Security and what they're putting up in Manhattan and other cities around the world. They put their own police stations up. Of course, the DOJ knew that for years and looked the other way until they had to have a counter for rolling up Miles Grove, the one whistleblower we ever had at the highest levels that knew about what the Chinese Communist Party were doing, and the one that was giving all the information. No, of course, he's rolled up into prison and not out until his trial. Of course, all these other guys walk free. This is a completely rigged game, and is rigged by money from the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party must be taken down, and anybody that's been a collaborator with them must be tried for treason, okay, because they know what's going on, and they're in the employ of the Chinese Communist Party. Melissa Hurray, your podcast has been on fire. Really special tomorrow. I think it's at 1 o'clock. I want you to talk about it. You've got a courageous reporter up there in Minneapolis that has written kind of a blockbuster book on the unfortunate situation we had in, was it June of 2020, ma'am?
Yeah, 3 years ago already. Thanks for having me back, Steve. So I'm the co-host of the Hope Report show. We stream live 5 days a week on Lindell TV, Frank Speech, YouTube, all social media platforms. But I've really been, here I am in the Twin Cities in this mecca of crime and social unrest. And I've been captivated, really, and burdened by the whole process, the whole George Floyd situation, namely the process of really making Derek Chauvin the sacrificial lamb for all social unrest that's happened historically. And I learned about Liz Collin. I mean, I knew about her. She's a Minnesota reporter. I'm from Minnesota. I was a reporter in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I followed Liz's career for a while. And I learned more about her story in Candace Owens' documentary on George Floyd, the biggest lie ever sold, talking about what happened to Liz and her husband, former police Lieutenant Bob Kroll. And she was actually, she was a really familiar face here in the Twin Cities. And it's just terrible what happened to her, how the mob, the woke mob, nearly destroyed them. But she wrote an explosive book about this whole situation. She is a real truth teller. The book is called They're Lying, the Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd. So we're just really excited to have Liz on tomorrow to talk about her new book. She's been canvassing the state and really, I think, throughout the country doing interviews. So we'll have her on tomorrow at 1 Eastern for the Hope Report. You can find us anywhere, social media, Mike Lindell's channels. But the book is really going to reveal some cover-ups, collusion, hidden political connections in Minneapolis. I just really admire Liz for her courage. And it tells the truth about the media and the left and really how we've all been lied to. So I couldn't be more excited to have Liz on, and I've admired her career and just thrilled to talk to her. I mean, we know about the corruption with BLM and about the $80 million raised after George Floyd's death. It really used to pour millions into trans causes and buy mansions and other dubious causes. So it's going to be amazing to talk to Liz tomorrow. I hope everyone will join Jason Perry and me at 1 Eastern for the Hope Report. We're so blessed by Mike Lindell to be able to have this internet TV show, and it's grown from 3 days a week to now we're streaming live 5 days a week. We have powerful testimonies of people who have overcome addiction or other strongholds in their lives. And we're interested in broadcasting truth, really, and having people tell their stories and share truth and biblical truth. We also do some topicals, biblical discussions. So come and check us out. We're so thrilled to have Liz and also many other exciting guests coming up for our powerful summer. And we're looking forward to Mike Lindell's summit coming up in August. I haven't been seeing Mike as much lately as he's been canvassing the country and, being the true patriot that he is. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in person next month at the Election Crime Summit happening in Springfield, Missouri. So maybe I'll get to see you there too, Steve, hopefully. But check out the Lindell.
We're definitely going to be there. We're going to be broadcasting there for 2 days. Really, Liz's story is amazing. This book is kind of a blockbuster. I'm really excited about watching tomorrow when you guys have her on, and we'd love to have her on. You should tell her. We'd love to have her on War Room because it's very powerful. And I think it kind of goes against. So people think this is all the Minnesota nice and this Floyd thing, what happened, and next thing you know, you're exposing corruption because there's something not right up there. Real quickly, I want to talk about the network. I got about 90 seconds. Walk me through, because this is a Christian-based network. Talk about your recovery network. Just give us a minute on that and about why the power of prayer and the power of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is so important to this.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve, for the opportunity. So I mentioned I was a news reporter for many years. After that, I got into addiction counseling, which paralleled my story of addiction recovery. And then I met Mike Lindell 5 years ago, and he told me about this dream and this vision he had to create a platform to help people struggling with addiction. So a few years ago, we collaborated and put together the Lindell Recovery Network, lindellrecoverynetwork.org. It's free. Mike has poured millions of dollars into this platform to help people, and it's no cost to you. You can go on there and connect to powerful testimonials. There's a church and treatment center database. All of the help is free or low cost. We also have the cornerstone of our program, which is the Operation Restored Warrior program. You can go through the whole course for free. Mike often talks about this being the way that he was really filled with the Holy Spirit and led into a real relationship with Christ. He considered himself a Christian, but didn't really think he was walking with Jesus. So you can go on to lindellrecoverynetwork.org, go under door C, and you'll find the complete Operation Restored Warrior course. So check it out. It's so powerful and transformational.
Okay. We look forward to watching tomorrow when you got Liz on with this blockbuster book and the story of the George Floyd situation. And you pass the word. We definitely want her on War Room. So thanks, Melissa. Thanks for doing us a solid.
You got it.
Okay, short commercial break. Our own Natalie Winters. Wow. Wuhan Lab and some of their partners that have been on TV a lot recently talking trash about people. You're going to be kind of shocked next in the War Room.
Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. Our own Natalie Winters joins us. Natalie, there's been a lot up about one of your favorite topics, but it's about there may be direct involvement in actually financing by the Chinese Communist Party. So I want to take it from the top. And you read the Wall Street Journal today. You've been all over this Sequoia situation. You understand the Democratic Party is essentially bought and paid for with CCP money. You see that through Mike Moritz and the money they're funneling through Sequoia, but it's also expanded now to the Republican Party. So we have, as you've been saying, it's even beyond elite capture. Now it's kind of elite merger. But walk me through this loudmouth who's been on TV nonstop since he kind of got called out. Was it by Elon Musk or Robert Kennedy and on the Joe Rogan show? And this guy went once again. Resurfaced. He was on TV every second during the pandemic and during the vaccine. And now there's been some other investigation about his relationships. I know you've been all over this from the beginning. So take it from the top and walk us through today's subject.
Sure. Well, I think our theory of the case has always been that basically the entire Democratic Party and a lot of these establishment Republicans have been bought off by the Chinese Communist Party. And I think people who watch this show see that, right? You see the policy outputs, you see the weak controlled opposition, China committees, and you never really get any real action. But I think what we're learning now as the days go by is that this sort of curated, again, it's really just controlled opposition of talking heads, of pundits, of politicians, also extends into the realm of science and the pharmaceutical industry, and specifically U.S. taxpayer-funded science. I'm, of course, talking about American researchers who receive your taxpayer dollars, millions of them every year, from Anthony Fauci and now his big pharma-linked successor. But a really interesting case of this, obviously, people who watch the show are familiar with the names Peter Daszak and Ralph Barrick. But what's so interesting is that these people are not isolated incidents. There are a lot of Americans who have received taxpayer dollars from Anthony Fauci to fund research that is in not just collaboration, but frankly, it's being spearheaded and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, specifically the Wuhan Institute of Virology and their network of People's Liberation Army controlled labs. And before we get into what exactly Dr. Peter Hotez, which is who we're talking about today, what exactly he was doing and sort of the interesting similarities that it bears to the whole entire COVID-19 pandemic and more precisely COVID-19 vaccines, just to take a quick step back, because you were talking about the China initiative with Brian, and I think that that's a really important point to make here. Sure, the China initiative was sort of performative, but the Chinese Communist Party vehemently detested the China initiative. They went into overdrive, pumping out all of their surrogates, using Chinese state media and these kind of civil rights groups to decry it as racist. That was sort of the angle of attack that they took. But one of the main tenets of the China initiative was going after the 1,000 Talents plan. And the Wuhan Institute of Virology is one of the labs that participated. I mean, basically all of the labs in China do, but if you read a lot of Chinese Communist Party literature in Chinese language on the lab, it's indisputable that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was actively engaged in recruiting foreign talents to come overseas and work with them in China. And that's why you see such a convergence, really a confluence of these American scientists working specifically at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But the key point to make here is not just that we were basically outsourcing scientific research in deadly pathogens and gain-of-function research, but it's very, very curious. And like you always say, there's no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. A lot of these American researchers who were caught up in this Thousand Talents-esque program at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in turn became some of the worst critics of people who promoted the lab leak theory and some of the loudest proponents of the natural origins theory, which is, of course, the Chinese Communist Party's preferred narrative on the origins of COVID. But this is where it really gets interesting, because obviously the Chinese Communist Party makes it difficult to really find hard, cold evidence, right, that the people that they compromise are indeed compromised.
Is it going out okay?
By them. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I will keep talking. But the key point.
Hang her for a second.
Sure.
Hang her for a second, because it's coming in choppy. Can we reboot her real quickly? What Natalie? Let's go and reboot Natalie. And what Natalie's talking about is the CCP funds these programs at universities, funds these programs in China for people to come here, funds these programs of people to work with them. And this is, the Thousand Talents program. This is one of the reasons they went so ballistic on what was called the China Initiative. The China Initiative was and let me know when she's ready to go. Just put her back up. The China Initiative was not a super, how do I say this? Not just broad-based, but it wasn't going to go at the top levels. And we keep arguing there's top-level people here that are compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. So the Justice Department, the FBI, Chris Wray, don't need to go out and make big speeches at Reagan Library. Bill Barr doesn't need to go make on Fox and talk about it. They just got to start looking at the laptop from hell, which they had in there. When he made that speech in January, was a 20, he already had the laptop from hell that they had verified was legitimate. The whistleblower told us in November of 19. However, they did have this program. And Natalie's absolutely correct. They went absolutely ballistic. One of the reasons I think they went ballistic, they were afraid other nations may pick up on it, and then they were going to have a problem. So, Natalie, go ahead and pick up. One thing I want to do is just explain to the audience what the Thousand Talents program is and why it's so important in their kind of overall unrestricted warfare against the West.
Sure. Well, when it comes to China's broader geopolitical goals in terms of reorienting global hegemony, so they're on top and the United States is no longer, it's not even that they want a bipolar world, I would argue. They want a unipolar world where they are the sole power. One of the avenues whereby they've identified as being the primary way to advance that is, of course, science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, particularly advanced scientific research. And the Thousand Talents plan is sort of how they try to draw particularly Western scientists, obviously from the United States, overseas to actually conduct their research in China to, of course, the then advancement of the Chinese scientific sector as opposed to the United States. And why that bumped up against the China Initiative was because a lot of these professors were failing to disclose the fact that they were simultaneously receiving funds from the Chinese Communist Party while also receiving funds from U.S. taxpayers. And again, to go even more kind of meta, because receiving funds from two countries simultaneously wouldn't necessarily be a sin at face value or a crime. But it's because when the Chinese Communist Party has these scientists in their orbit, it's not for altruistic scientific research, right? It's not to actually advance the cause of science. It's specifically to use scientific advancement to the detriment of the West, propping up the Chinese Communist Party. And of course, all of this looming over the fact that there really is no for lack of a better term, Chinese wall between military and civilian science, right? They have military civil fusion over there. So even though you might be working on, gain of function research, just totally hypothetically, to understand where bat coronaviruses come from genetically, 2 years later, oh no, all of a sudden the PLA is working on a vaccine that's curiously timed with the release of COVID-19 into the world. So that's sort of where it gets very messy. And you're exactly right when it comes to, I remember back in the Trump administration when Hurray and Barr were doing all these speeches about Chinese Communist Party infiltration, but as they always did, they were missing the forest for the trees. They were focusing primarily on the Foreign Agent Registration Acts and how there were so many registered foreign lobbyists here in the United States on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. As it stands, there are around 270. But Hunter Biden wasn't a registered foreign agent. People like Peter Hotez, people like Peter Daszak, people like Ralph Barrick aren't registered foreign agents when they should be. And I've always maintained this. The Chinese Communist Party, when you go CCP, you don't go back. They're like a radioactive element. There is no way that you can be involved with the Chinese Communist Party, take money from them, take research grants from them, and not be compromised. And the way that you see that is that it was the researchers like Peter Daszak, like Ralph Barrick, like Peter Hotez, who took millions of dollars in these joint scientific research programs between the United States and China. Oftentimes it was de jure branches of the Chinese military funding these initiatives, right? Ardently Chinese Communist Party outfits funding them. And these were the loudest voices propping up Chinese Communist Party propaganda on the origins of COVID and not just that, but stonewalling investigations into the true origins. So I know the United States doesn't necessarily like to conduct foreign policy with a strong emphasis on, ROI or return on investment. That's why we're hemorrhaging billions of dollars to Ukraine. But that's not the guiding principle that the Chinese Communist Party follows. They get a very high ROI on the foreign voices and foreign individuals and foreign groups that they choose to invest in. And right now with COVID and specifically the ongoing debate about the origins, you see that ROI on full display because people who are American, I would argue American in name only, right? The people who are also simultaneously on the mainstream media networks that are also up to their chins in Chinese Communist Party cash and foreign influence operations. But these are the voices that the Chinese Communist Party had been investing in and curating for decades. So even if they did release a bioweapon that is COVID-19, which obviously at this show we believe they did, they would have immunity against it because they're rather insurance, because they had a whole entire line of defense of American scientists who would be defending them. So it really is calculated. I think it's easy to get caught up on these one individuals, but it's a broader network. It's a broader campaign that the Chinese Communist Party is waging.
This is what I wanted to have you follow Costello, because he talked about the pressure that came against the China initiative in talking about Moritz funding the ACLU. And when they shut it down, they said, well, hey, we got pressure from two groups. We got pressure from the civil rights group saying this is racist, which is nonsense. Lao Beijing will tell you the CCP is the worst destroyer of the spirit and soul of the Chinese people. But he also said they got tremendous pushback by the universities, in particular the research universities. I know something that's bugged you from the beginning is the association of not just Hotez and Fauci and these guys, but also they're all associated with some of the most prominent research universities, Barrick, the whole crowd. So walk me through that, because you're seeing this is the way their system works of compromise and control of the United States of America. Walk us through that other aspect when he said they got tremendous blowback from the research universities and from all these prominent researchers and research scientists. I know on the Barrick and Hotez case, which you've been all over, that's always bugged you from the beginning, ma'am.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to look at these, for lack of a better term, COVID experts as a symptom of a much bigger problem, which is that these universities are just awash with Chinese Communist Party cash. But obviously people know that. But where I think that the real issue is is the fact that the legislation is such that they don't have to actually disclose who is actually funding them if it comes from foreign sources. And while the Trump administration tried to sort of work around that, there's really been no meaningful legislative changes to that. So these universities can literally take any amount of money from the Chinese Communist Party. They don't even have to put it in a shell company or pretend that it's coming from some nonprofit. And they don't have to list it. They don't have to report it. That's what we saw going on, for example, with Penn and the Biden Center, because they weren't listing who exactly was giving them money. Yeah, they had to show what money they were bringing in, but you don't have to itemize it. And you don't even have to necessarily show which school or which kind of subunit of a school it gets filtered to. And that's why it's so concerning, because so many of the upper echelon people within the Biden regime, they all come from Yale, from Harvard, University of Chicago, Stanford. And it's not just the ideological compromise that goes on there. This is, like Brian was saying, people get put up there as fellows, they get put up there to give speeches. And it's basically just, I mean, it's money laundering. That's what it is. It's a sort of a barely legal way for the Chinese Communist Party to pay people to give, an hour-long speech. They get paid an inordinate amount of money. And to make the sort of even the further point, which is the revolving door, is that so many of the people who then kind of, I would argue, fall backwards into government and specifically into the Biden regime, they're coming from all of these elite institutions. Take Pamela Karlan, for example. The number one school that was lobbying the DOJ to drop the China initiative was Stanford. They wrote, even though they have the Hoover Institution, they wrote a whole letter slamming it as racist, saying that you need to drop it. This is, a horrible tragedy of justice. And Pamela Karlan used to be one of the top professors in leadership at Stanford University before becoming basically top dog at DOJ, leading those efforts to stop audits into the elections in Arizona. So this is how they do it. It really is brilliant in terms of the Chinese Communist Party. They know money talks, and these universities are strapped for cash. And of course, they still want to be able to accept and take foreign students. But that's why it's so concerning, because it goes all the way to the top universities, and all of the people that I've listed, with the exception of Peter Daszak, they've all been affiliated with universities. I mean, I think probably the best example too is take the Galveston National Laboratory, which is affiliated with the University of Texas. This is a biosafety level 4 lab. They were running a decade-long joint partnership with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they were training them to work with the world's, quote, most deadly pathogens. And if we obtained through FOIA requests the intricacies, the details about this arrangement, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology could tell the Galveston National Laboratory that they would have to erase documents, delete pathogens, not have any meaningful transparency into what Wuhan was doing, and they would have to be okay with it. And they signed off on it. And the only logical reason as to why people would be okay with what the Chinese Communist Party is doing from a contractual perspective, but even just broader from a geopolitical perspective, is if they're just paying you so much money that you can't say no, and that's what they've been doing.
Last thing before I let you go, we only got a couple of minutes, but you also did about Blinken. Talk to me about that consulting firm they had. I mean, when you talk about it in the Praetorian Guard around him, it's at the research university, it's every step of the way, and of course, not just the Hunter Biden is being compromised, but you got Blinken and Sullivan. Every one of these guys has got their hands somewhere in a different cookie jar that's got CCP cash in it. Am I incorrect on that, ma'am?
See, this is why I both love and hate doing Battleground, because I get to be on here for longer, but also makes me more upset because we can follow these stories to their logical conclusion. And Anthony Blinken is a perfect example of that, because his consulting firm, West Exec Advisors, which was basically located at the White House, not right next door, one of their main consultancy practices was advising American institutions, colleges, and universities on how to receive foreign funds. If you look at their website, which of course has now been deleted, the top country that they talked about was China. This was quite literally what they were making money off of doing. And remember, Blinken was involved with the Penn Biden Center. Blinken had been speaking at a bunch of these universities that were, of course, funded by the Chinese Communist Party, at these institutions and these symposiums where they were advocating for, closer ties between China and the United States. That's the euphemistic slogan that they always love. We talked about Kurt Campbell, Joe Biden's Asia czar, being involved with CEFC China Energy. That was the firm that Hunter Biden was working for. I think my point is the overall takeaway is that the people like Hunter Biden, Peter Hotez, it's important to know their names because we need to make them famous and infamous because the left is very good at doing that. We're not good at doing that. But you need to remember that these aren't just isolated individuals. Don't miss the forest for the trees. There are a ton of Hunter Biden, maybe not on the degeneracy front, but in terms of the compromise front, there are a ton of people like him. There are a ton of people like Blinken. There are a ton of people like Hotez. And if you want to find them, just look at the top levels of the United States government because the Chinese Communist Party has intentionally put them there. Like I said, they have given the Americans a masterclass in what foreign diplomacy with a high ROI is. Just look at the Biden regime.
Natalie, you're a national treasure. You really are. You're encyclopedic knowledge. And this is because for 3 years, the last 3 years of her life, ever since the pandemic started, under the tutelage of Raheem over at National Pulse and now at the War Room, you have used that Harvard, Westlake, University of Chicago training and really gotten into the receipts. And that's why your knowledge of this is, quite frankly, better than anybody's in Washington, D.C. Where they go to get you on social media, ma'am, and how they get your exclusive content on our site and through our emails.
Well, I blame Delta Gamma, but you can find me at Natalie Winter on all platforms, and make sure, especially Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, but make sure you go to warroom.org to get the newsletter and sign up for it.
I am not going to blame your sorority. I'm going to go back to your prep school and blame some of the hateful teachers there, right? The mean girl teachers. If they could only see you now.
They're not girls. They changed their gender to become trans. So the mean trans.
Natalie, thank you. Great job. Man, this thing with the CCP, I'm telling you, it is bad. It's a disgrace. And coming up on the 4th of July weekend, we're going to focus a lot on this, about what the revolutionary generation would think about where we are today, what they stood for, what they fought for, what they delivered for us, what they bequeathed to us, versus what we've done with it as a nation. Not you, the War Room posse. We know you're fighting. Okay, we're going to be back here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will make you one commitment. The show will be absolutely on fire. We'll see you back here at 10 a.m. in the War Room.